An old man who had nothing left but a bowl of rice and a memory fed a stray golden retriever every morning without fail. Not for gratitude, not for company, just to feel alive. But one rainy afternoon, a truck didn't stop, and neither did the dog. No one saw the accident. No one heard the old man fall. Only Sonny did. And what this stray dog did next would remind an entire town what it means to love without condition. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching this from? Type your country below, because today's not just about an old man or a dog, it's about all of us. A world losing its warmth. A story that dares to bring it back. Fern Hollow was the kind of town where seasons still mattered. In spring, the air was perfumed with pine sap and thawed soil. And in autumn, smoke from chimneys curled like ghostly fingers above weathered rooftops. But now, as the edge of winter crept over the Oregon woodlands, the morning frost settled quietly across the back fields like a hush that never lifted. It was the kind of cold that found your bones before it ever touched your skin. Walter Briggs stood on the creaking wooden porch of his log house, staring out toward the tall tree line of whispering pines. 84 years old, his back was curved not only by age but by grief. He wore a threadbare brown cardigan over a flannel shirt, suspenders holding up corduroy pants that had seen better decades. His white hair was combed flat, but unruly tufts escaped at the sides like old thoughts refusing to be tamed. His hands trembled ever so slightly as he placed a ceramic bowl gently on the floorboards. Inside, a portion of steamed white rice and a few small pieces of leftover grilled chicken. Then he spoke, his voice soft and slightly hoarse. "Breakfast, boy." From the edge of the property, past the tangle of blackberry bushes and the rusted mailbox now leaning like a tired sentinel, came a figure. A golden retriever, perhaps a year old, with sun-washed fur that shimmered gold in the pale morning light. His coat was patchy near the haunches, and there was a faint scar near his right eye thin, like a thread someone had forgotten to tie off. His ribs were no longer visible, but he remained lean, the kind of lean that told a story of hunger only recently tamed. He moved with both caution and grace, as if the world still held a threat in every sound. This was Sonny, the name Walter had chosen not because of the dog's color, but because the animal had arrived on the first clear morning after a brutal December storm. Sonny approached the porch slowly, his amber eyes locked on Walter's but never quite trusting. He sniffed the bowl, took a step back, then moved in and began eating with neat, measured bites. Walter sat down slowly on the old porch swing, its chains groaning in protest, and watched in silence. He didn't speak much anymore, not since Kyle died. His only son, broad-shouldered and bold-eyed, had served in the Navy and never come home. The official story was a naval accident in the South China Sea, but what Walter received was a folded flag and a letter that bled no comfort. That was 11 years ago, and in that time the house had grown quieter, the walls more hollow. Walter had stopped using the living room. The photos stayed in their frames, dust collecting like tiny tombstones. But Sonny had filled something. Not a void that would be too hopeful, but perhaps a crack in the dam. Walter had noticed the dog first in midwinter, curled beneath his old Ford pickup, shivering but silent. He had set out a bowl of oatmeal that day, then chicken the next. The dog had never barked. He had never growled. He simply came and went like a tide, never allowing a touch. It was enough. He watched the dog now, licking the bowl clean, tail low and slow. "My boy had a dog like you," Walter murmured. Name was Buddy. Always slept at Kyle's feet. Used to chase squirrels around the barn like his soul depended on it. Sonny lifted his head slightly, ears tilting. Walter chuckled, then coughed a dry sound that rattled in his chest. "Bet you were someone's once, too. Someone who didn't deserve you." From the porch window behind him, the lace curtain shifted slightly. Inside, a small fire crackled in the wood stove. Walter had already prepared his tea weak and lukewarm and a slice of toast slathered with apricot jam. The routines mattered. Not because he cared to keep time, but because without them there was no sound in the house but wind. At the edge of the yard, a blue sedan slowed to a stop. The window rolled down, and a young woman with copper-blonde hair and a loose bun leaned out. Megan Lively, late 20s, short and warm-eyed, worked as a librarian in town. Her voice carried in the quiet air. "Morning, Mr. Briggs. That dog still visiting?" Walter nodded, not standing. "Every morning, like he owns the place." Megan smiled gently. She often stopped on her way to work, dropping off fresh bread or checking in. "He looks better. You've been feeding him chicken again, haven't you?" He shrugged. "Just scraps. He's lucky to have you." Walter didn't reply. Megan's smile faded just a little, as if she saw the shadow behind his eyes and knew better than to press. "Well, I left you a loaf of rye and some canned peaches on the porch table. I'll check on you again Thursday." Walter gave a small nod. Megan waved and pulled off down the gravel road. Sonny watched the car go until it disappeared behind the bend, then lowered his head again. The morning air had grown sharper. A breeze rolled in from the woods, carrying the earthy smell of pine needles and decaying leaves. Sonny, finished with his meal, backed away as Walter slowly rose and took the empty bowl. He didn't try to approach. He never did. Inside, Walter washed the bowl by hand, slowly, methodically. He looked out the window at the edge of the clearing where the dog had vanished once again. Then, almost without realizing it, he whispered, "See you tomorrow, boy." Snow had fallen in Fern Hollow overnight. Not the kind that melted by noon or lingered in muddy piles, but the soft, whispering kind that blanketed the forest with hush and hush alone. It coated the pine boughs like icing on old cake and filled every crevice between the fence rails and roof shingles. The world had quieted, as if the whole town was holding its breath. Walter Briggs woke slowly, wrapped in the layered warmth of 2 quilts and the smell of wood smoke from the stove that had burned through the night. His knees ached more than usual, and he could already sense the frost pushing against the windows. He pulled on his flannel and boots with care, slower now than he would admit, and made his way to the kitchen where the routine called. A few scraps from last night's pot roast were warmed gently over the stove and mixed into a small scoop of white rice. He moved with care, spooning the food into the chipped blue bowl, the one with a faded picture of a goose on its base. With the bowl in hand, he stepped out onto the porch where the air bit at his lungs and the snow crunched under his weight. The yard was a soft sea of white. Tiny indentations, paw prints, distinct and deliberate, dotted a trail from the woods to the porch. He smiled faintly. "So, you've already come." Moments later, from behind the old cedar stump near the edge of the clearing, Sonny emerged. The golden retriever looked somehow even more golden against the snow, his fur matted slightly from moisture, but his posture relaxed. He approached without hesitation, eyes alert and tail low in quiet motion. He still didn't come close enough for touch, but Walter had stopped expecting that. It was enough that he came at all. Sonny began to eat, slow and measured as always, never wolfing the food as strays often did. Walter lowered himself onto the porch swing, the old chains creaking in the cold, and opened a thin, leather-bound book. "You don't mind if I read a bit, do you?" he asked, the question floating into the stillness. Sonny made no reply, of course, but he didn't turn away. As Walter read aloud, his voice grew steadier. It was a story about a sailor who lost his way at sea, only to find home again through the sound of bells. Walter paused after a few paragraphs and looked up. Sonny had stopped eating and was now seated just a few feet away, staring at him with those deeply expressive eyes. Eyes that, for a fleeting moment, reminded Walter of Kyle. He closed the book gently. "My boy used to sit right here," he said, motioning to the step beside him. "Read to me, not the other way around. Always with that dog of his curled at his feet. That dog never wandered, never needed a leash. Buddy, his name was. Darn mutt would have followed Kyle into fire if asked." His voice caught slightly at the edge, as if stepping too close to memory's flame. Behind him, the front door opened softly. Megan Lively appeared, her boots knocking off flakes of snow at the threshold. She was bundled in a thick green parka, her copper-blonde hair tied into a casual braid over one shoulder. A canvas tote hung from one hand, brimming with wrapped bread and a small jar of honey. "Good morning, Mr. Briggs," she called gently, not wanting to startle him. Walter turned, managing a nod. "Miss Lively, you're out early." She stepped forward carefully, not wanting to scare Sonny, who had shifted but hadn't bolted. "Wanted to bring this before work. I baked too much again," she added with a sheepish smile, cheeks flushed red from the cold. Her voice was light, but her eyes carried a quiet concern. Megan was the sort of woman who made others feel heard without saying much herself. In town, she was known as the one who remembered which patrons liked large print books or needed help with heating bills. She'd grown up in Fern Hollow, left for college, and returned when her father passed, drawn by roots she couldn't explain. Now she paused at the porch's edge, letting Sonny see her. "He's beautiful," she said softly. "Looks healthier than when I first saw him. You've been good to him." Walter shrugged. "He does fine on his own." Megan tilted her head, snowflakes catching in her lashes. "He might disagree." Walter looked at Sonny, who had resumed his seat and was now watching the two humans as if trying to understand their exchange. "He won't let me near him," Walter said. "Been coming for nearly a year. Still doesn't trust me." Megan stepped up beside him. "Trust takes time, and kindness repeated." They stood in silence, just for a breath as a breeze stirred snow from the branches. Then Walter coughed, sudden and sharp, a deep sound that rumbled through his chest and made him clutch the arm of the swing. Sonny stood abruptly, ears perked, tail stiff. Walter waved it off. "Just the air," he said, though he looked pale. Sonny took a step forward. Just one, but it was the first time he had ever moved closer without the lure of food. His tail lowered again, not wagging, but calm. His ears shifted back slightly, and he let out a soft huff. Megan watched carefully. "I think he knows," she said. Walter nodded, breath still shallow. So did Buddy. He always knew when Kyle was sick. Sat right by him, wouldn't leave. You could tell, somehow. Sonny inched forward again. This time, he was only a foot from Walter's boot. He didn't touch him, but he sat firmly, deliberately, his body square and present. Walter looked down, and for the first time in months, there was the smallest quiver in his chin. Guess some things come back when you need them most. Megan placed the jar of honey on the porch rail and stepped back. "I'll be by Thursday," she said gently, voice quiet, "and I'll bring more bread." Walter didn't look up. "Thank you, Miss Lively." As she left, Sonny remained seated beside him, a silent sentinel in gold and snow. By early April, Fern Hollow had begun to thaw. The snow had long since melted into the earth, giving way to the first tender shoots of green poking from muddy soil. The town smelled of wet bark and rain-drenched blossoms. Mist curled around the trunks of pine trees in the mornings, and the hills ran slick with runoff that made every slope a quiet danger. Walter Briggs, bundled in his brown coat and boots still too big for his narrow feet, didn't trust the sloped trails much this time of year, but old habits die hard. And he needed his bread, canned beans, and tea. He walked with a measured pace, his canvas grocery bag cradled in the crook of one elbow, the other hand gripping a wooden cane that had once belonged to his father. He avoided the main road, preferring the hill path near the orchard, a longer route but less crowded and quieter, with robins calling from branches above and wildflowers blooming where they pleased. That day, the clouds had shifted from soft gray to something heavier. A cold drizzle began to fall just as he reached the top of Willow Bend Slope, a narrow hill where the asphalt curled into a tight bend and the runoff from earlier storms made everything slick. Walter's footing, already unsure, betrayed him halfway down. His heels slipped on a patch of moss-soaked concrete, and before he could find his balance, gravity took him. The world spun. The grocery bag flew from his arms, and he fell sideways down the incline, hitting the grassy edge hard. His body landed with a dull, wet thud in the shallow ditch beside the road. The impact stole the breath from his lungs, and a sharp pain bloomed in his side like fire. He tried to move, but couldn't. His vision blurred, raindrops needling his skin, the scent of wet earth in his nose. From above, he heard it before he saw it, a low rumble growing louder. A dark-colored pickup truck came flying around the bend too fast, tires skimming over rain-slicked asphalt. The driver saw Walter far too late. There was a screech of tires, a desperate jerk of the wheel, and the vehicle swerved violently, grazing the edge of the ditch. The side mirror clipped a low branch with a crack, and the truck jolted back onto the road before speeding off, never stopping. Walter's eyes fluttered closed. He lay still. In the field just beyond the orchard fence, Sonny had been watching. He'd followed Walter from a distance that morning, as he sometimes did, staying hidden among tree trunks and hedges. His instincts, finely tuned by hardship, told him something wasn't right. When he heard the sound of tires and then the sudden skid, he bolted toward the road, paws thudding against the wet ground. The golden retriever emerged from the trees just as the pickup disappeared behind the bend. His fur, darker now from the rain, clung to his frame as he bounded down the hill. He found Walter motionless, slumped beside the broken bag of groceries cans spilled, a loaf of bread soaked through. Sonny sniffed him, then let out a series of sharp barks that echoed through the hollow like alarm bells. There was no one. Sonny turned his head, ears twitching. Then he ran down the road, back up toward the town. He stopped every few yards to bark, loud and desperate, pausing only to listen. After less than a minute, another vehicle appeared, a white sedan crawling carefully over the slick pavement. Its driver, a middle-aged man with a round face and tired eyes, slowed as he saw the drenched dog in the road barking and not moving aside. Sonny darted in front of the car, barking louder, forcing it to a stop. The man, confused, rolled down the window. "What the?" Then he noticed Sonny turning, barking toward the side of the road, glancing back, then barking again. Something clicked. The man opened his door, rain hitting his jacket immediately. All right," he muttered and followed the dog cautiously. There in the ditch, he saw Walter, still pale and soaking wet. "Jesus," the man whispered, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "Hang in there, old-timer." Sonny circled, letting out softer whimpers now, eyes locked on Walter. The spring rain had picked up, a cold, persistent drizzle that washed the town of Fern Hollow in a curtain of gray. Roads slicked over with runoff, headlights blurred in the mist, and the clouds hung low like woolen blankets wrung damp by the sky. On Mill Creek Road, a white delivery van rolled slowly down the hill, wipers squeaking a metronome's rhythm. Inside, Eli Sanchez was cursing softly to himself in Spanish, tapping the steering wheel in time with his stress. He was behind schedule. Again. Eli was in his early 30s, medium build with broad shoulders, a slight limp in his left leg, and hair shaved close to the scalp. He wore a green delivery uniform jacket zipped halfway, revealing the edges of a worn Marine Corps t-shirt underneath. His brown eyes were sharp, quick, the eyes of someone who'd seen more than he cared to remember. After serving 2 tours as a combat medic, Eli had left the military 5 years ago, settling in Oregon to escape both the heat of the Middle East and the weight in his chest. He didn't talk much about the war. What he missed, though, quietly and often, was his grandfather, who had raised him after his parents' divorce. The old man had died of a stroke, alone, on his porch, and Eli still carried the ache of that phone call. Today had started like any other: coffee, back braces, route list. But nothing ever stayed routine in Fern Hollow, especially not when a dog stood in the middle of the road barking like hell in the rain. He spotted Sonny just as the van rounded the curve before the orchard's edge. The dog was soaked, fur clinging to his body in ragged gold, and he was barking frantic, sharp, unwavering. Eli slowed to a crawl, confused. He didn't see any other vehicles, no humans, just this one stubborn, insistent dog in the rain. "What the heck?" he muttered, pressing the brake. Sonny didn't budge. Instead, the dog turned his head, barked again toward the roadside, then looked back at Eli, tail stiff, stance alert. It wasn't random barking. It was direction. Urgency, a call. Eli sighed and reached for his rain jacket from the passenger seat. Okay, I get it," he mumbled as he opened the door and stepped into the downpour. The dog had already begun moving, trotting back toward the roadside. Eli followed, his boots splashing through muddy puddles until he caught sight of a figure lying motionless in the ditch. "Oh, God," he whispered, breaking into a jog. "Sir?" "Hey, sir!" Walter was pale, soaked through, his clothes clinging to his thin frame. His cane lay half buried in the wet grass, and the grocery bag nearby had spilled its contents: a shattered jar of preserves, some bruised apples, a half-crushed loaf of rye. Eli knelt beside him, checking the pulse first weak but there. He slipped off his own jacket and draped it over the old man's chest, shielding him from the worst of the rain. Sonny hovered nearby, low to the ground, tail twitching, his eyes never leaving Walter. "You brought me here," Eli said, glancing at the dog. "You really did." He pulled out his phone with practiced fingers and dialed 911. "Yeah, I've got an elderly man, unconscious, possible head trauma, shallow breathing. I'm at Mill Creek Road, just past the Orchard Bend. Get me an ambulance. Now." As he waited, Eli didn't look away from Walter. His breath came fast, chest tight. The memory of his grandfather rushed back like floodwater, the helplessness, the too-late arrival, the what-ifs. He couldn't let it happen again. Not this time. He talked softly, almost to himself. "Hang in there, old man. Help's coming. You're not alone. Not today." The sirens began to wail in the distance, weaving through the pines. Eli sat back on his heels, soaked to the bone, and looked at Sonny, who had moved closer and was now resting his head lightly against Walter's knee, as if that touch might anchor him to this world a little longer. Rain had given way to a brittle kind of sunlight, the kind that warmed nothing but made things look cleaner than they were. Outside the Fern Hollow General Hospital, spring flowers poked cautiously from soaked soil, unaware of the quiet storm unfolding just beyond the hedges. Inside the hospital's administrative wing, Sheriff Becca Holt stood in front of a monitor, arms crossed, jaw tight, watching the grainy footage for the third time that morning. Becca was in her mid-50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with shoulder-length steel-gray hair she kept pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail. Her uniform was crisp, her belt perfectly balanced with sidearm and notepad, and her face held the expression of a woman who'd seen too many things fall apart. She'd been sheriff of Fern Hollow for nearly a decade, known for her calm demeanor, dry wit, and a fierce loyalty to justice, earned in equal parts by action and silence. Beside her stood Deputy Lane Keller, younger by 2 decades, slighter in build but quick on his feet and loyal to a fault. He adjusted the playback again, pausing on the blurry image of a dark pickup truck making a sharp turn near the orchard. In the corner of the screen, barely visible, was the hunched figure of an elderly man, half hidden in the ditch. "Enhance this frame," Becca muttered, leaning in. Lane did what he could. The footage was from the general store's security camera, grainy and distorted by rain, but with enough work, the first 3 characters of the license plate emerged. A partial but promising start. Becca glanced at the evidence table beside them, a plastic bag containing debris collected from the scene, including paint chips and a cloth used to swab what looked like a blood smear from the hood of a pickup. Preliminary tests confirmed it wasn't animal. Human, matching the rare blood type listed on Walter Briggs's chart, AB negative. Becca had known Walter all her life. He'd taught her civics back in high school, had once pulled her aside during a rough year and handed her a dog-eared copy of Lincoln's speeches with a sticky note. Words heal. She never forgot that. She owed him. "Run the partial plate," she said. "Cross-check with pickups registered in county limits." Lane tapped keys quickly. After a few beats, he looked up. Match found. 2009 black GMC Sierra. Registered to Travis Dean. Lives outside town, on the old gravel loop. Becca's brow furrowed. "Travis Dean," she said slowly, like tasting something bitter. "Walter's godson." "I thought they'd had a falling out?" Lane asked cautiously. "They did. 7 years back. Dispute over property emotional and ugly. Walter hasn't spoken his name since." Becca didn't waste time. She grabbed her coat, nodded toward the exit. Let's pay him a visit." Meanwhile, across town, Megan Lively pulled into the hospital's visitors' lot. Her car was a modest hybrid with dog hair always clinging to the passenger seat. She carried a small paper bag with a thermos of soup and a paperback novel tucked beneath her arm. Her first stop wasn't the front desk. It was the east gate. There, just like the last 4 mornings, lay Sonny. His golden fur was matted slightly, his tail curled around his paws. He didn't bark, didn't whimper. Just watched the sliding glass doors that led into the hospital as if willing someone to appear. Megan knelt beside him. "You're early," she said softly, offering him a small piece of bread from the bag. "But I guess you don't sleep much, do you?" Sonny sniffed the bread, took it gently, and returned to his vigil. Megan had first seen him there the morning after Walter had been admitted. She hadn't thought much of it then. But then he came the next morning. And the one after that, always waiting, always silent, a sentinel made of fur and sorrow. She sat with him a moment longer, brushing light mud from his coat. "He's stable now, you know," she whispered. "They say he's fighting. Maybe because he knows you're still here." Inside, nurses had begun referring to Sonny as the Golden Shadow. No one tried to remove him. They all knew, somehow, that he belonged to someone, or that someone belonged to him. Walter Briggs awoke to the beeping of machines and the soft rustle of nurse shoes on linoleum. The hospital room was pale with morning light, filtered through blinds that sliced the world into stripes. His body ached in places he'd long forgotten existed. His ribs, his hip, the inside of his chest where grief liked to settle. But he was awake, and alive. He blinked slowly, eyes adjusting to the sterile glow above him. The first thing he saw was a paper cup of water on the tray beside him. The second was the familiar golden shape curled silently at the foot of the bed. Sonny. The dog lay motionless, his head resting on his paws, watching Walter with those amber eyes that always seemed too full of knowing. His fur was matted near the belly from rain and dust, and he smelled faintly of earth and pine needles. Walter managed a weak smile. "Still here," he croaked, voice dry as gravel. Sonny didn't move, just blinked, then let out a barely audible sigh. A moment later, the door opened. In walked Sheriff Becca Holt, her posture stiff with the weight of what she carried. Behind her was a man in his late 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a plaid jacket too light for the season. His hair was sandy brown, cut short, and his boots made a sound too heavy for someone that tentative. Travis Dean. Walter didn't say anything right away. He stared at the man the way one studies the ghost of a dream that once mattered. Travis kept his eyes down until Becca gave a subtle nod, then stepped forward. "Walter," Travis said, barely above a whisper. I didn't know it was you. I swear I didn't. I panicked. I didn't stop. I didn't know what to do." Walter studied his godson's face. He hadn't seen it in 7 years, not since the day Travis stormed out of the farmhouse shouting about fairness and land and betrayal. He had aged. There were lines now around his mouth, and his voice carried the roughness of guilt. "I could have killed you," Travis continued, voice cracking. "I nearly did. And I just left you there like a coward." Becca stepped back to give them space. Sonny stood then, slow and steady, and walked over to Walter's side. He didn't growl, didn't bark. He simply looked at Travis, tail still, head tilted like a judge weighing what words couldn't say. Walter cleared his throat, took a long sip of water, and then spoke, soft but deliberate. "Did you mean to hit me?" "No, God, no. Did you know it was me?" "No." "Then it wasn't intentional." Travis nodded, eyes glistening, unable to speak. Walter looked out the window for a moment, watching a bird land on the sill and flutter away. Then he turned back. "I'm not pressing charges." Becca raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. "You don't get off clean," Walter added. "You'll carry this with you. You'll look in the mirror and see this moment every time you blink. That's heavier than anything a court could hand out." Travis swallowed, tears slipping free now. "I will. I do, every second." Walter's voice grew firmer. "Then make it count. Fix what you broke not just with me, with the people you've pushed away. Sonny stepped forward slowly. He stood between the two men, glanced up at Walter, then over at Travis. There was no hostility in his posture, only quiet recognition. Walter noticed. "Even the dog seems to think you deserve a second chance," he said, lips curling into something almost like humor. Becca finally stepped forward again, clipboard in hand. "Walter, for the record, you're refusing to press criminal charges?" "Yes, ma'am," Walter said. "But I want it noted that this boy doesn't walk out of here unchanged." "He won't," Becca said quietly. Travis reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this for you, in case you didn't make it. I don't deserve to say it out loud, but it's yours." He left it on the bedside table, then took a step back. Walter didn't pick it up. Not yet. He simply nodded once, eyes tired. We all lose ourselves sometimes. Just don't stay lost. As Travis turned to go, Sonny followed him with his gaze, then calmly returned to Walter's side and lay down again, head on his paws. Watching, always watching. The air in Fern Hollow had shifted. Summer arrived not with fanfare but with the slow blooming of sunflowers along fence lines, the hum of cicadas in the trees, and the dusty scent of heat settling over porch rails and gravel roads. The town moved at half speed beneath the golden haze, but for Walter Briggs, time felt fuller now, each hour carrying with it something closer to lightness than he'd known in years. He was home again. A wheelchair waited on the porch when he needed it, but Walter preferred the cane most days, determined to reclaim his own rhythm. The pain in his hip still pulsed, but the quiet warmth of a July morning could almost dull it. What eased it more was the sight of Travis Dean kneeling in his overgrown garden, dirt on his hands and sweat darkening the back of his collar. Travis had been returning every day since that first visit without being asked, without fanfare. He'd repaired the porch step, trimmed the blackberry vines swallowing the east fence, and quietly accepted Walter's silent nods as signs that things were mending. He had changed, softer, more deliberate in his movements, like someone who had been broken and put back together with new hands. His eyes, once quick with blame, now held patience. Each morning he showed up early, sometimes even before Walter opened the back door. And then there was Sonny. No longer the nameless stray, Sonny had become something closer to family. The townspeople knew him now, not as a nuisance, but as a sentinel. The golden shadow who had stood guard outside the hospital day after day. He had filled out, too, his fur shinier, his gait stronger, and his eyes calmer. Each afternoon, Travis would take him for a walk down the back trail, past the creek where the frogs croaked endlessly, while Walter sat under the birch tree with a book in his lap. Sometimes they walked in silence. Sometimes Travis would speak mostly about repairs, or memories of working the orchard with his grandfather, never about the accident. The town had taken notice of it all. At Lively Books and Brews, the cozy bookstore cafe on Main Street, owned by Megan's cousin, a handwritten sign had been taped to the front window. Benefit reading night, stories, coffee and hope, all for Mr. Briggs. The idea had come from Eli Sanchez, who had walked in one afternoon, ordered a black coffee, and told Megan it was time to give back. "I know what it's like to lose someone and feel too late," he said, "but this town still has time." Eli, ever the quiet force, organized everything. Flyers, donations, even a local band that could barely play but made up for it in charm. He moved with the same precision he'd once used triaging under fire-focused, calm, efficient. When he asked the community for help, they answered. The Cozy Corner Diner donated pie. The high school's drama teacher offered up students to perform readings. Megan, of course, promised free tea and a stack of Walter's favorite poetry books. The night of the event, the bookstore overflowed. Walter, wearing his best flannel and sitting with a pillow behind his back, was wheeled in by Travis. Sonny padded in behind them, tail gently wagging, and was immediately greeted with gentle pats and a dog biscuit from behind the counter. The crowd applauded not raucously but with warmth. People Walter hadn't spoken to in years nodded to him, some with tears in their eyes. Eli stood at the front and spoke first. "Tonight," he said, is not about a fall or a mistake. It's about what comes after. About a man who forgave, a dog who stood guard, and a town that remembered what kindness looks like. Megan read a short story Walter had once lent her. Travis thanked the town in few but honest words, and Sonny lay beside Walter the entire evening, head on his paws, occasionally lifting his gaze to scan the room like a quiet protector. When the night ended, the donation jar was full. More than full. Someone had anonymously left an envelope with enough to cover Walter's remaining medical bills and a note that read, "For the man who taught me how to stand still and listen." Autumn arrived in Fern Hollow like a hush after song, golden leaves fluttering down from ancient oaks, smoke curling from chimneys in soft blue spirals, and the wind carrying a crispness that made everything feel fragile and fleeting. Walter Briggs could feel the shift in the air, not just in the trees or the soil beneath his porch, but in the way time now curled gently around his thoughts. Days felt full but not rushed. He had made peace with the rhythm of things. He no longer feared the end. One afternoon in early October, he sat at his writing desk, the one facing the window where the light hit just right before sunset. The room was quiet but alive with memories photos of his son Kyle in his Navy uniform, a black and white image of a young Walter and his late wife Clara at the town's fall fair, and a faded sketch Kyle had drawn of their old Labrador, Buddy, when he was just 10. With shaky fingers and a steady heart, Walter picked up a pen and began to write. "Dear Kyle, it's been a long time, son. Too long, maybe. I always meant to write sooner, but I didn't know how to start without unraveling. I suppose age teaches you that it's better to begin badly than never at all. I want to tell you about a dog. Not Buddy, though you'd be glad to know I still remember how he used to nudge your cereal bowl when you weren't looking. No, this dog is different. His name is Sonny. He came into my life without permission, but never asked for anything. Just showed up. And stayed." Walter paused, rubbing his eyes, then continued. "Sonny saved me, quite literally. Pulled me back into life after I'd nearly been left behind on a rainy road. He barked when no one else saw me. He stood guard outside my hospital room every single day. People talk about guardian angels, but they always imagine wings. Sometimes they come with paws and eyes that look straight through your soul. I also need to tell you about Travis. I know you remember him, your cousin in all but blood. We had our fight, you remember? I told him he was selfish. He told me I was unfair. He left and I let him. He came back the day I almost didn't wake up. He was the one who hit me, Kyle. Not on purpose, but he ran. And then he came back. I forgave him. I hope you would have too." Walter looked up to see Sonny lying beside his desk, his head on his paws, as if he understood every word. Walter smiled. "Forgiveness is strange, son. It doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes it comes because we're too tired to carry the weight anymore. But in giving it, I got more than I expected. I got my porch fixed. I got visitors. I got a second chance at being part of this place. They held a fundraiser for me, you know. Eli, he's a good young man, used to be a medic, put it together. Megan helped too. She's the one who brings me bread and prunes, even when I don't ask. She reminds me of your mother, quiet strength. Sharp eyes, always thinking 3 steps ahead. She's been tending to the garden like it's sacred ground. Maybe it is." Walter's hand trembled as he signed the bottom of the letter. "With love, always, your old man." He folded the letter and tucked it into the back of Kyle's photo frame. That night the sky was clear, stars scattered across the black velvet canopy above. Walter drank his tea, watched Sonny curl up beside the bed, and felt something settle within him, a kind of stillness he hadn't known in years. He passed quietly in his sleep, the faintest smile on his face. Sonny remained curled at his feet until dawn. The town mourned him like it would a tree that had always stood on Main Street. At his funeral, held under the birch tree in his backyard, people gathered with quiet reverence. Megan wore a navy coat and placed wildflowers near the chair he once favored. Eli read aloud from the letter, just a passage his voice steady but wet around the edges. Becca Holt stood in uniform, hand on her heart. And Travis, in a black jacket and tie too small at the neck, placed Walter's old cane against the porch column as a kind of tribute. Sonny didn't bark. He sat beside the chair and stared at the front door, as if waiting for it to open one last time. In the weeks that followed, Sonny kept returning to Walter's porch every morning, sitting beside the empty bowl that Megan continued to fill, even when no one was watching. He no longer slept beneath the trees, but chose the top step, facing east, where the sun rose through the branches. Eventually, Travis adopted him, not because he had to, but because Sonny had already chosen him. Megan, true to her quiet devotion, took over the garden. Each week, she trimmed the roses and whispered little updates to the soil, as if Walter might be listening from the roots. People still passed by the house and slowed their steps when they saw the dog on the porch. Some waved, some left notes. A child once placed a drawing under the bowl. A man with a cane, a dog by his side, and a yellow sun in the sky. Sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends them with golden fur, tired paws, and a heart that refuses to give up on the forgotten. Sonny wasn't just a dog. He was a second chance. A silent guardian with no voice but a message that roared through the quiet corners of Fern Hollow. That loyalty still lives. That forgiveness is possible. That love, true love, does not demand anything in return, only presence. Walter didn't leave this world alone. He left, held by the gaze of the one soul who never stopped waiting, never stopped watching, never stopped loving. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you pass a porch with an empty chair or see a dog lying by a bowl long untouched, you'll remember this story. You'll remember that miracles don't always fall from the heavens. Sometimes they walk on four legs and teach us how to forgive without asking for anything back. Sometimes they're the reason a man finds his way home, not to a house, but to peace. If this story moved you, please share it. Leave a comment and tell us the name of the animal who changed your life. Hit subscribe to hear more true stories of quiet courage, healing, and the kind of love that only grows stronger with time. And may God bless you and every soul you've ever loved, whether they walk on 2 legs or 4.